Well, hello and welcome to Agenda 21 Radio. This is the radio show that is stopping totalitarianism, one exceptional American at a time. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, are you that exceptional American? Well, I suspect you are. That's why you're listening to this radio show right here, right now on Agenda 21 Radio. Remember to visit our website, a21r.news. That's a21r.news. And of course, New California State. New California State, State of the Future. And definitely want to say a shout out to everybody in Shasta County. Good luck today. In the next several days, they've got a lot of big decisions to make, including maybe criminal things going on. And I did enlighten Patty Plum. You heard it on the radio here. And I've also we've made it very, very clear to some other folks in very special places that there's criminal behavior going on by the county clerk recorder and his crew. And that is not a very light statement to make. It's a very heavy statement to make. But in light of the situation, this is now a presidential election, there's significant amounts of possibility for fraud there. So that is a big problem. And the people are protesting, by the way, in agreement, I think. They suspect that they don't know what, it hasn't been investigated yet. So there needs to be some hearings. And I'm going to recommend to our people in New California State that we have additional hearings now. We do the whole state thing again. We did this back after 2020's election, and now with the ending of the 27 days of counting ballots and watching all the fraud go on, it's now time to come out and do another 70. I don't know. We did 70 hearings the last time. 70 hearings around the state. And boy, was it convincing information. That's the whole thing, so our focus will be on the election and, was it right, wrong? What was your experience? That's it. And that's all we want to hear about. People can protest, I guess, outside, but not inside. We'll make that very, very abundantly clear. But with us right now is our favorite, and that's Simone Anderson's with us. And Simone, how are you? It's wonderful to see you. Is it raining there?
Good morning, Paul. And yes, it's raining. So I'm in the little cabana at my favorite park.
I see. Well, I'm looking outside my window. I'm just, I don't know how many miles away from you in Northern California here, but I see the rain behind you. I'm like going, God, it's not raining here. Actually, but further north, you guys got a lot more rain than we did, but we got a lot of rain the other night, man. That was the last time I remember having it rain so hard was in 1997. And that was the big flood of 1997 that took place around here. And the Oroville Dam filled up and the Feather River was torn up and you couldn't drive down Highway 70 and all that stuff. And are we going to have the same repeat, I guess, is the question in December?
Well, I think we were talking the other night on the New California call that disaster relief is one of the things that's kept California's coffers liquid. The government takes the money for the federal disaster and then somehow it gets siphoned off. If you've known anyone who had their house burned down in a fire, they haven't gotten their money yet. So it gets siphoned out and used to pay the pensions and the things that we've been discussing in the show.
Yeah, that's a sad thing. And more and more people are becoming aware of that. And clearly Donald Trump is aware of it. He was aware of it in 2020. When he came out here and did his own investigation on the Paradise Fire. And
well, if you remember the body language of Jerry Brown when he was walking with Donald Trump on the tours of the Paradise Fire, you didn't have to be a body language expert to understand that there was some extreme tension in that relationship and those tours that happened right after the Paradise Fire.
And Gavin Newsom was also there.
I didn't remember Gavin. I wasn't really that familiar with him at the time because I hadn't really been paying attention, but I did know Jerry Brown.
Jerry Brown
looked around my entire adult life.
Yeah. And he's from Colusa County, which is right near where you are right now and not too far from me. And he has his residence there just a little bit south of where the proposed site's reservoir is. And it's kind of interesting. The water is not supposed to be very good, but it'll be perfect for fracking. And Jerry Brown has frackable soil underneath his ranch. I just can't figure out why it could be a problem. Can you?
Yeah, I think it's kind of like the same thing. They're all opposed to mining here in the United States, but under the Obama administration, they were trying to tie up uranium assets in Turkey. Joe Biden, Burisma is a fracking company. So it's completely insane because our politicians are in other countries lobbying and taking over. I know that Joe Biden's son was actively involved in blocking U.S. companies from buying strategic metals in foreign countries and then arranging for China to buy them instead.
So, and they got money for that.
Oh, of course they got money for that. That's one of the things you can see on the computer. Joe Biden's son has 3 computers, and actually there's people that took the computers to Switzerland and had them diagnosed like 3 years ago and broke down all the information and all the crimes. So it's just another FBI cover up. I'm not sure what's going to happen. I heard that they were floating around that Joe Biden's son may be pardoned by Trump. I mean, this guy's done everything from income tax evasion to molesting children. If you look at the stuff, he's with underage Chinese children in some of the videos that he's got.
Right. Yeah, I've seen
so
I've seen those pictures.
Only, Joe Biden sold Kamala Harris out. So maybe they made some kind of deal because the party traded out on Joe Biden and flushed him down the toilet. So it's very possible he went to Donald Trump, who he had internal polling. He knew he was going to be winning. So there's very possibly been a deal for Hunter. I've just found the whole Hunter thing very interesting in that he left his computers there. Everybody's been cooperative, like his ex-wife, his ex. So sometimes I wonder if that wasn't intentional. He's obviously a person that has a lot of problems. Yeah. And there may still be a good person deep down inside. He's had a very unfortunate life. His mother was killed when he was a child. He was in the car. He almost died. His siblings died with him. There's always been a suspicion that his father was involved in his mother's death because he was having an affair with Jill Biden. So it's really hard to know what
the housekeeper.
I pray for that family because I think that they have a lot of issues, and you and I have gone over the history of Joe Biden's family. He did not grow up in a loving, giving family. His family co-founded the transatlantic slave trade. And so you can imagine the depravity and the things that may have occurred in his family lineage. He might be the more normal one. Who knows?
Well, it's really kind of funny because we talked about the Biden family. Then you also talked about Kamala Harris's family, which has slave trading in their background, family lineage. And, the interesting thing is that now we're looking at what's happening here in our country, and they're trying to norm slavery. I really believe that. I really believe, we're seeing it with all the companies that are hiring all these illegal foreign nationals that come across the border, basically being paid slave labor. But there's also the child sex trafficking thing, which there's no stopping this. No one wants to stop it. There's not any desire. We've gone down and pleaded 6 times at the Capitol building in front of everybody with speakers blaring, demanding that these people stop this stuff, and that nobody wants to stop it.
It's amazing. Understand, that's kind of a segue into kind of the things that we wanted to talk about today is the agenda of the United Nations. And I really don't think that most people understand exactly what this group of people, unelected, illegally organized, these people have no right to control us. Under the Biden administration, he repeatedly tried to give the WHO, another organization that's primarily funded by Bill Gates. So why would we want to give Bill Gates more money after we just discovered all the crimes that he's committed? So the United Nations is an organization that's founded on the principles of the Communist Manifesto.
Right.
A lot of people may not understand this, that's what the Communist Manifesto has been brought into worldwide organizations via the United Nations. And that's really what's going on right now. Today, I wrote down a few different things that I wanted to go over to explain to people who the United Nations is and what their primary goals are. Because everything that's been crammed down our throats, basically my entire adult life, is related to the United Nations and control over our children, the normalization of pedophilia, the normalization of slavery, And a lot of people might think I'm crazy, but just please stay on this until the end of the show. And I'm just going to go over a few of the founding principles of the United Nations. So many people may not understand that the political structure of the United Nations will originally be a political structure, but over time it will become a spiritual structure. And the Pope will be the head of the spiritual organization that will serve the universal cosmic Christ, or Lucifer. And the word Vatican itself means divine serpent or serpent's house. And the Pope's amphitheater, where he speaks from, is the mouth of the serpent. You can go look at it for yourself. It's not a secret. So this is basically, Lucifer also means Venus. So it's a form of goddess worship. And so that's why we see a lot of men dressing as women. It's a tribute to the goddess. And I also learned this recently. Maybe I'll go into this a little farther down after I talk about, people are wondering where this big transgender movement is coming from. And
Right.
the goals, the primary founding goals, the top 10 goals of the United Nations is to eradicate the male and female distinction. And now a lot of people are confused by why this would be important, because according to the leaders of the transgender movement, they are also transhumanists. And they believe that mutilating and giving up the vision of self is part of moving us to a time when they're going to put a computer brain in our brain, a chip, and they will be able to control us via groupthink and AI. So these aren't my opinions. These are the well-stated opinions of leaders of this group. Everything that I'm saying in quotations today is basically a quote from them. I may be paraphrasing at some points, but let me continue. So that's where we're getting this big push from all the major corporations that are owned by the City of London via the SEC and our international corporations. So they represent us dead people. A corp relates to the word corpse. So corporation, because in the Admiralty law system, we're all dead cargo. So this is a complicated conversation. You and I have had it on other shows. I know you've had other people. If anybody wants to delve into that anymore, they can go to my Rumble station, Lost in Translation show, and look up the podcast, The Justinian Deception. And this literally takes documents from all the organizations that I'm talking about. In their own words, you can understand what's coming. So they're also going to remove all nuclear weapons. Now, nuclear weapons are what allows certain countries to defend themselves. And it's been the only detriment to this New World Order gang taking over planets. So if we didn't have nuclear weapons, of course, all of the countries that are proponents of this New World Order have nuclear weapons. So they need to remove the nuclear weapons so they can have complete control of the planet, because there still are groups of people. Even you may not love Putin, but Putin openly says the New World Order will not move forward in our part of the world. So you can disagree with him on many topics.
Well, you see that happening right now with Ukraine. It's not going to happen.
Exactly. And I was going to talk a little bit about Ukraine today, but let's kind of get through these top 10.
Sure,
I'm extremely concerned about the Korean soldiers that are working in the Ukraine. So we'll go on to that in a few minutes. So they're also going to create a new world constitution, and this will be a one-size-fits-all. This will not take into consideration anybody's cultural norms or anybody's religious beliefs, because they're going to destroy all cultural mindsets and remove all world religions and merge them into one religion that's led by the Pope. Because Catholicism as a political structure has absolutely nothing to do with the birth of Christ. It's based on ancient Mithra worship and pagan issues, and they've slowly combined and put forward most of the pagan celebrations. For instance, Christmas and Easter have absolutely nothing to do with the birth or death of Christ. Christmas is the celebration of Saturnalia, Saturn, Satan, for the people who worship Saturn. Ishtar is Easter, and Easter is a pagan fertility ritual. That's why we always see the bunnies and the rabbits, because yes, that has nothing to do. It was actually an ancient fertility ritual. So we're constantly being led down this path of removing everything that's actually based in the three Abrahamic faiths and replacing it with this new criteria. So after they destroy all the cultural mindsets, we'll embrace a oneness and not be influenced by parents' values, and the new world order will tell us what our opinions and mindsets should be. And one of the big supporters of the United Nations, one of our presidents who was the biggest supporters, was George Bush Sr. And you play his 1,000 Points of Light New World Order speech. So he was a person who was put in place a long time ago to bring about the fruition of the system.
Well, that date that he gave that speech was September 11th, 1991. Should be very telling.
And it is very telling. And since that time, basically my entire adult life, that we've been in this collapsing system, and this agenda has been put forward. Since we took over, the Federal Reserve completely took our country over in the 70s when we went off the gold standard, and they got rid of Nixon, who wasn't in favor of these things. And they welcomed China into the World Trade Organization, collapsing all of our economies, killing off the Chinese. For some reason, if you listen to people like Margaret Sanger and Bill Gates' father, it's not only the Black people who need to be wiped off the planet, it's also Asian people who need to be wiped off the planet. So we've seen this, look at North Korea, where they're starving people right now. There's one of the biggest famines since the 1990s in North Korea right now. They do not care about these people. And for some reason, they hate the Chinese, not just the Blacks. So children will be offered a bad education that will teach perversions to them, because there'll be a one world education. And the goal of this is to normalize pedophilia, as you and I have talked about. And this isn't my imagination. This is actually the reason they want children to break away from their family and their societal norms. You can go to the United Nations. For the last several years, they've been floating legislation and floating programs that basically, if the children say it's okay, then you can have sex with them. So basically, this has already been implemented in the United Nations, and they're slowly moving this forward. That's why people like George Soros, who are United Nations supporters and have this world vision, are in favor of human trafficking and slavery, because it gives us access to the children. And then the long-term goals, and this is kind of crazy because I don't think most people have ever comprehended this. Humanity will merge into God and have a union of mind and spirit, because we are all becoming gods. And now this was Robert Taylor and some speeches he made in front of the United Nations in the 1960s. So as I said, you can see with even the hippie movement that was financed, and people got too complacent. So they actually did things like the mass murder.
Jonestown.
Things like that, because they didn't, people were opposed to war. The children who'd grown up with their fathers gone, there was a big anti-war movement. So although they started the hippie movement in right out of number 8 Downing Street in London, and MI6 and the CIA, they did it to disrupt the family, right? Because they wanted children turning against their family, but it kind of went off because they also turned against war, and they couldn't have that. So they created some situations where these communes, and Charles Manson, who was a CIA operative and well-funded by the MK Ultra platform that we've talked about on this station before. So a lot of people don't understand where the United Nations original doctrine, when it's not based on the Communist Manifesto, came from. So I invite people to go look up a lady named Alice Gould Bailey. And now she wrote a book based on the Lucifer Trust, who published her book. And the Lucifer Trust is the founding document and group of the United Nations. And so the United Nations doctrine that's not based in the Communist Manifesto is based on the channeled writings of Alice Gould Bailey. And now she followed Aleister Crowley. And many people may be aware of who Aleister Crowley is. He kind of is a pop culture figure because he's worshipped by the people in Hollywood. But he was a warlock, a transgender, and an occultist who's commonly considered the father of the New Age movement. So were you aware of any of these things, Paul?
I was aware of her, and that was, in fact, there's, when did she pass away?
She was well into the 1900s. I don't remember exactly when she passed away, but I know she was very active up here in the Redding, Shasta County area.
Yeah.
Marina Blavatsky. A lot of this darkness in these cults occurred in Northern California. We can still see a remnant. You have to be really careful here. And even organizations like Bethel Church are based in this doctrine. So it has infiltrated most organized religion. You have to be extremely careful about what church you're going to. Make sure your church isn't teaching like prosperity gospel. If you're a good Christian, you're going to make money. All of that is completely fictitious stuff and is based in all this new age kind of stuff. So,
well, that's interesting you bring it up that she's there. And again, the Wikipedia of her, I could probably put this up on the screen, but with all their little advertising.
Well, and I'm no expert on anthropology, but you can see pictures of her as a young woman, and the same with Blavatsky. They were trans. They were men dressed as women. I'm definitely sure about Blavatsky. I'd have to take a closer look at Bailey, but because they belong to this ancient cult where transgenderism has been practiced, they gender invert their children. This has been going on for a long thousands of years. So
this is kind of interesting in the conversation because we're now talking about pedophilia and now we're transgender, and the ideology behind it, how deep it is that we don't even know about.
Well, and it's all based in this doctrine of basically turning everything. If you understand communism, communism is meant to destroy everything, right? The basis of communism is to destroy God's creation, completely invert it, and then build back a system. And you see wherever they've done this, Russia, North Korea, people live in slavery. People have no rights. They take their children. I think after the Soviet Union fell, one of the Russian or East German people gave all their medals back because they had been shot up with drugs and stuff since they were taken away from their parents at 5 years old. I know this having employed highly intelligent Russian people. My assistant when I was working in Moscow was a nuclear physicist because he'd been forced to go. He didn't want to make nuclear bombs, but his family was threatened. And of course, his family got a better car and a better housing. And that's how they reward you they take everything from you and then you're begging and willing to do anything.
Right.
So you can eat and you don't watch your children starve to death. This is their system. This is what they're implementing on us right now. And the United Nations, every single thing they put in place is contrary to the U.S. Constitution.
Everything.
So that's why agents like Barack Obama and Kamala Harris, people who are open communists, constantly work to remove our constitutional rights.
Every little detail they can. That's the thing that, as an example, I always talk about, in California, we don't have any constitutional rights any longer. They're all gone. They just don't enforce it. They don't talk about it. They do everything contraindicator of the Constitution, and so does Joe Biden. So and the key thing to understand, so people understand where I'm coming from, I'm always talking about the guarantee clause of the Constitution, and that they're going to be guaranteed, everybody, every American, by that Constitution is guaranteed a Republican form of government, freedom from invasion, and freedom from domestic violence. Every single one is we're all supposed to be guaranteed that, but that's not the case. They just ignore it and they don't enforce it.
Well, the unfortunate situation is the people who control the planet understand that our country went bankrupt in 1999 and the Constitution has not been resubmitted. And that's why we have all these foreign countries trying to take our country over, because we are ruled by no laws right now. Yeah. So unfortunately, we're in a situation where the Constitution is not being applied because, to my understanding, it's no longer valid. It was a contract with the King of England to enter into the Admiralty law system. We had 3 opportunities to go bankrupt. We did go bankrupt 3 times. The last time in 1999, our country was open for capture. And since that time, we've been run by a rogue government on both sides who support the former City of London control of our country. So we're in a crazy time right now. People are calling on the Constitution to be limited, but I'm not so sure that it's actually a legal thing that's in place right now. I'm actually going to have the opportunity to interview the person who claims to be the Postmaster General of the world today and to go over some of these different things. In the fall, I somehow ended up connecting with him via a neighbor and said that I could interview them coming up. So I'm going to be doing that in the spring. Now, some of the things that today we talked about: eugenics, transhumanism, and the United Nations agenda are all connected with transgenderism. So today, because transgenderism is such a big issue, I'm going to kind of be focusing on that, but I am going to briefly go over transhumanism. And now the father of transhumanism was a guy named Huxley. And he, if you'll notice, all of the leaders from these groups of people clinically suffered from depression and were frequently, like Darwin and all these new theorists, were in and out of insane asylums. Dr. Spock and those different groups were raping children. They were pedophiles. I mean, there was all this craziness of this stuff that was implemented from World War I on into our society. And Huxley says through these processes that the unthinkable will become the thinkable. Right. And what did we see after these group of people started to implement? We saw concentration camps. We saw gas chambers. We saw abortion on demand. We saw all these different things that came from these kind of thought processes and systems. So if today, can you imagine in 1985, you literally having an argument with someone at Thanksgiving dinner because they think it's okay to castrate a 7-year-old? This is the unthinkable becoming the thinkable. What are we doing now in communist countries because they can't afford, they murdered all their unborn children, and now there's no one to take care of the aging parents. So in China, 3 to 4 million old people disappear every year because the government can't take care of them. The children have to go to the cities to work. Their children go home and just find someone else living in their family house who has no idea where what happened to their parents or where they went. My sister was there 3 years ago, and the Chinese numbers were 3 million disappeared. So that literally, if that just happened since she was there 5 years ago, that's another 15 to 20 million old people that have been murdered in communist countries. Not to mention all the abortions that are committed, so they're murdering their younger generation. So that's a whole other topic, but these are literally agendas of the transhumanist eugenicists. Now, Huxley was a eugenicist. Like I said, he was considered the father of eugenics. And he's the one who's pushed all these societies popped up. And Bill Gates is a eugenicist. His father was. So many of the people, even people like Barack Obama and Michelle Obama, publicly make glowing statements about Margaret Sanger and Planned Parenthood.
Right.
And in their world, Michelle and Barack would have never been born because they would have obliterated all the Black people in the 1930s and 40s.
And
So
they're trying real hard to do that in New York State right now.
Well, because the boule, the house slaves, right, throughout history, this just didn't happen in America. This goes way back in time to the Egyptian. These people, if you notice in movies, they always pair up a Jewish guy with a black guy, and the black guy is always saving him. That's a reflection of how Hollywood's run via the boule society and the crab barrel system, which you and I have talked about, where these people in these different groups work to keep their own kind down for fame, fortune, and money. And we just saw that with P. Diddy, and we saw the parallel one with Jeffrey Epstein. These are all control mechanisms of these perverted United Nations groups. If you notice, P. Diddy was at all the Democratic fundraisers with Oprah. Oprah. Groups of people, correct? So
Adam Schiff.
Yes, because, and what is Adam Schiff has a charity to massage little boys. They don't massage little girls; they just massage little boys.
Little boys, right?
Orphan people. I mean, I don't know about you, but that sounds pretty strange to me. I guess orphans do have a lot of stress, but it seems like little girl orphans might need a massage too, if that was really the goal of the charity. So now Robert Miller was another UN guy, and I want to quote you some of the stuff that he has to say. So Robert Miller says, "We will all become gods. The goal is to have everyone in the world give up their individuality for the love of their fellow man and goodwill. The spirit of inclusiveness will be implemented under the doctrine of the right brotherhood of man. It will allow humanity to avoid irresponsible behavior and prepare the world for the immortal leader, the one, the absolute supreme," and that's the Masonic word for Lucifer. The Masons were created by the Jesuits who served the Dark Pope to bring about this new world order and reinstate the Catholic Vatican system of total control over the world. If you don't consent, you'll be murdered, imprisoned, or both. So a lot of this activity is, as you've seen, everything from the riots on the campus to these different organizations and the Democratic Party are funded by George Soros. And George Soros was a Nazi who does not regret his time as a Nazi. He intentionally collapsed the Bank of England, which the Bank of England owns all the banks in the world. So they never told us the truth, but literally they collapsed our banking system during that time because the Bank of England owns all the Federal Reserve. So we've been under attack, basically, like I was saying before. I was born in 64, basically, since Kennedy was assassinated in 63. But it was really before that when Project Paperclip, the Germans lost the war, but the Nazis did not. 800,000 Nazis were extracted after World War II within 2 weeks. People like Robert Mueller's father, people like Kevin Spacey's father, Arnold Schwarzenegger's father. I'm just trying to name a few. There was a lot more. I live in Anaheim, where there was a big wave of Germans. I was born in Anaheim and still spend a lot of time there. There was a big German community there. And what you come to understand is that a lot of them were extracted Nazis, and they were brought to areas like Anaheim, where the people that were also part of this New World movement that's predominant in California were open to taking Nazis in and giving them false names and backgrounds. And so we've been infiltrated by them. And a lot of people, if you look this up today, it'll say George Soros was not one of the co-founders of MAMBLA, the Man Boy Love Association, but it was on the internet for years until people became aware of it a couple years ago, and then they've changed the Wikipedia or whatever. So
is NAMBLA actually in Wikipedia?
Yes. Jeez. Well, it was the last time I checked a few years ago. I'm not sure
That's and what people don't understand. I mean, I know I'm very, very familiar with it. I've been familiar with it since 1986, actually, and actually even a little bit before that, but 86 because I would applied it in different legalese and finding kids and things like that. But it's known as the North American Man-Boy Love Association, who
Right.
at the time in 1986 was predicting that by 2020 the norm would be pedophilia and child man-boy love would be normal.
Well, because these people, the Nazis, they practice these ancient occultist practice, right? And so this is part of their religion. They believe the true epiphany with God is that kind of sex. I don't want to be too vulgar on the station, but that's why we see it so predominant in the Catholic Church, as we've discussed. The day they did that big event to raise money for the Catholic Church, they raised $10 million. But that same day, the Archdiocese just of Los Angeles was fined $850 million for their sexual abuse of children. So these are the ancient practices of these ancient cults. It's not a criticism of the good Catholic people that go to church every day and believe that they're worshiping Jesus Christ. If you really look into the Vatican system, you actually worship the Pope as God on earth. And
which is one of the things that Martin Luther stood against.
Of course. And they burned Martin Luther at the stake. So this has been going on for a long time. Yeah. And one time I was actually shopping. I used to work in Hollywood, and once in a while I'd shop a script, and we had this one on Martin Luther because it was a really powerful story. But you know, they burned him to death at the end. He was a monk, so he had no love life. People are like, there's no story here. The guy was not interesting, except he was burned at the stake. I mean, that was just, you know, a paraphrase. Yeah. But
of course, he's very interesting to us in New California.
Right. So this is what George Bush talks about in his 1,000 Points of Light speech. The 1,000 Points of Light symbolizes the fall of Lucifer, who was the light. Lucifer means like the light of the morning or something like that, which Venus is the morning star and it's the evening star. So it's both. So this is why we have Venus worship. The name of Venus, which is a Roman name, that planet used to be called Lucifer before. So like I said, this goes back to old occultic practices. And Alex Bailey, in case anybody, I don't know if while we were listening, some people just decided to look her up. But if you want to look at her book, and if you have any confusion about it, please go to the direct quote in her book, Satan as the God of this planet and the only God. So she's telling you who she worships and what her plans are. And literally right now, if you go to the United Nations, I don't know if you've seen this over the last few years, but the United Nations logo now has the term New World Order under it. So they've changed their logo, and now it openly says New World Order.
Yeah, that's something that we've seen before with the New World Order from the United Nations, which has been around. Well, they've been around since 1947 as an organization. Clearly all condensed under one roof, so to speak, is what you're talking about. But in more intense lately, of course, with the advent 1992 of the United Nations Agenda 21 plan, which is the plan for the worldwide domination that you're talking about, in which we're seeing our many of our counties and cities by many of the agencies from the United Nations. They utilize them, and they've actually developed their same very, very similar type of legislative style with regionalism. And of course, regionalism in Russia, or in the former Soviet Union, was known as Soviet style governance, in which it was nothing more than bureaucrats and had nothing to do with elected officials or anything like that.
No, well, once they have the power, they're going to have a hard time giving it up. They've literally starved and mutilated millions of people, keeping their system in place. So when
that's what we're seeing right now, though, is the struggle that you're talking about with basically with Trump and with with the left that's that struggle. I think Trump's going to prevail, but this is a tough time.
Well, and that's why political people have gotten so much money from outside countries. I don't know if you saw the Act Blue.
Right.
There's a lawsuit that was just filed. $100 million was lied to and put into all different categories and different areas of the country. But the Act Blue money was coming supposedly in small donations from individual people, and they went out and surveyed these people for the lawsuit, and they put 100 million in small donations that were from old people who used to be registered Democrats or dead people. And so there's a file right now to show that most of the money from the Democratic election came from Act Blue. And if you remember, both guys who shot Trump were involved in Act Blue.
Yep.
So these different organizations create radical people. They're probably part of the MK Ultra program in some way, knowingly or unknowingly. But what people really need to understand is that the United Nations is a spiritual organization. And this is what Mr. Keyes, another big UN spokesperson, Lucifer will give men wholeness because the UN is not a man-made creation. So if man did not make this creation, who did?
Then it has to be Satan.
Well, and that's what they're telling you.
Right.
Correct?
Right.
So it's no secret that Satan rules this planet. I was talking to a young girl once, and she saw that I was listening to a program on my radio. And she said to me, I'm really curious about religion. I'm really curious about this and that. And I kind of tried to explain some of the things to her, that even some of the stuff that she was being taught in her own church was actually, if you drive by many churches today, especially the Universal Church. Universal translates to Catholic in Latin. So when you see the rainbow flag on the church, the rainbow flag is the Masonic flag. It doesn't represent the LGBT community. Well, it kind of does, because that's part of the movement, not for everyday people, but these political massive structures with large amounts of money are going into them, come from the Jesuit Masonic system. And the rainbow flag, I was a rainbow girl. When you go into the Masonic Hall, the flag is the rainbow flag. So this is the flag of Lucifer, the flag of the United Nations. That's why they're always flying it, often over the flag of our country. Generally, you put the flag of your country and you put the minor flags below it, the state flag, the county flag, whatever. But if you'll see, especially in places like San Francisco, the Masonic flag, I was in the halls of Washington, D.C. They had the Masonic flag in front of their office, not the American flag. So that represents the Luciferian New World Order system. So if you're going by a church, there's literally evangelical priests right now preaching that Jesus was gay. So most likely in one that has the flag, and it's not a lot of people who are gay who I know are having a big backlash right now, because they've just been made to feel like idiots, and all these movements with people going around with their faces painted and all this crazy stuff. That is not the average gay friend that I have right now, or people that I've went to school with or something. It's this crazy insanity where they're using this movement to bring about all of these different things we just mentioned, and it has nothing to do with the rights, because honestly, I feel like there's more of a pushback in the gay community right now, because people are fed up, and the people running around half naked in the streets are a very small percentage of that group too. And they're being used to push things and to create strife in society. We have to understand, they want us fighting with each other. So they're throwing all this stuff out so we can call on the government. And what has everybody done over the last few years is they just want to go to rallies and see that one other person is going to change everything. This is not the reality. That's what I really respect about your movement, Paul, because your movement is actually a ground up movement. And over time, it's going to be as effective of all these other different movements that they put forward to us. And a lot of people don't understand that transhumanism and eugenics are related, because transhumanism means we're going to put chips in our brain and we're going to control everybody. And my question has been with the transhumanists. So apparently the transhumanists who are upgraded humans are going to live forever. The same group of people wants to murder 6.5 billion of us because we don't want to be transhumanists. So where are all these people who are going to live forever going to live if the world's overcrowded, right?
Yeah, that just doesn't make any sense if you think about it.
And we see eugenics being practiced on the poor people of the world right now. How many people in poor countries are dying while the cartel takes their life savings, or dying on the way, and then they're selling their children and their bodies? So eugenics, you know, most of these people who get sold into sexual slavery die of drug overdoses, tuberculosis, AIDS, all these different things. So it's another avenue of their eugenics, because they believe they own the world. The Pope believes he owns every soul on the planet. He owns our birth certificates. Therefore, he owns us. So transhumanism is a really dangerous thing. Most of the Silicon Valley CEOs, including Bill Gates and his wife, are transgenders. I'm not going to go into everybody. There's plenty of people want to go. There's plenty of channels that do trans investigations that show, that are anthropologists who use the age-old way they used to identify the mummies, to identify which one of our public figures is already living a trans life, because it's the way to transhumanism, when they're going to put a chip in our brain and they're going to control us via AI. And one of the biggest proponents of this is Elon Musk. So we have demons right in our midst. Maybe they're there, maybe they've changed their ways, I don't know. But transhumanism is the goal of Elon Musk. So we'll see how that correlation, like I said before, our government's bankrupt. That's why they're cutting all the jobs. It's not because all the government finally decided to say, you know what, we're tired of employing 2 million people. We're tired of sucking off.
We're done with that.
The lifeline, right? We're done with that. So.
Well, anyway, we have to run for time right now. Yeah. This has been awesome, and I'm really appreciative that we were able to share this with the audience and set some standards about it. There's a number of things we need to come back to in terms of our standards that we've been doing in terms of Agenda 21, because we have been hammering about Agenda 21 for so many years. This is our 15th year. In March will be our 15th year doing this. And it was Rosa Corey who really kind of kicked the whole thing off. And of course, she's passed away, but she was the one who really brought to attention, to me anyway, in a very big way, because I was sitting here wondering about my experiences in 1992 and 89 with communism, and seeing the world around us disintegrate and not really understand. I was aware of Agenda 21, but I wasn't totally aware until she showed up at my studio at the old Mount Huth, as we called it, in Linda. She drives from Santa Rosa to Linda to have a 15-minute interview with me. Now, that's a motivated woman. Of course, she had the book, The Green Mask, Behind the Green Mask. And that was what tipped it off to me, this book about that. Then I had another friend in Santa Rosa says, you've got to listen to her. And so she drove out, and it ended up a 2-hour interview. And it was on a Thursday, and I walked into the owner of the station, Tom Huth, and I said, Tom, we've got to do this radio show called Agenda 21 Radio. And with that Thursday, we started off with a 2-hour show, and we haven't stopped since. But, you know, there's a lot of coming back to the basics and fundamentals. And we've already brought in the Hitlerian thing, the communist thing, into all that stuff. But now it's really, we're seeing what we're fearing the most. And that's transhumanism and all the sexual things going on, and the openness with which they carry about their business, which is, of course, slavery and all those other things. These are the things that are coming out of that bottle. And that's the bad genie.
Well, because the New World Order people are the former Romans who made their fortunes in the slave trade.
Exactly.
Where was the last part of the Roman Empire to fall? Southern Germany.
Yeah.
Where do all these people come from?
Southern Germany. Listen, we've got to go for time now. So anyway, Simone, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure as usual. We're definitely going to get you back on again because we got more to talk about. Thank you very much. How can we get a hold of you?
My email is SimoneMAnderson@AOL.com. And I have a channel on Rumble, Lost in Translation Show, one word. And if you wanted to hear a little bit more or send some more information on to your relatives, I have a Rumble channel, and it's got United Nations Goals 1 and 2. And there's also one on transhumanism that goes into more depth. And today, for anybody, at 9 o'clock, I'm releasing my special episodes where I'm going to be interviewing some former NFL players. So if anybody wants to tune in today, I've got former Roy Girella. He was also a coach for the Aggies. He was a Pittsburgh Steeler during the heyday and 3 Super Bowls and 9 division champions. So please tune in for some lighter content so we can focus on the things that bring us together, not the things that tear us apart.
Thank you very much. Simone Anderson here with us on Agenda 21 Radio. And remember to visit our website, a21r.news, and of course, New California State, and definitely help us out, donate to the cause, because Simone and other people are going to go back to Washington on our behalf for statehood. So thank you very much for listening, and stay strong, America. We are exceptional, America.
We're sending out an SOS to the last vestiges of freedom, democracy, and the American way of life. Paul Preston with Agenda 21.
This is AENN, American Exceptionalism News Network.
The citizens of New California State have worked diligently since 2018 to exercise their rights given in the Declaration of Independence, United States Constitution, Bill of Rights, and the 1849 California Constitution to restore freedom and liberty for everyone, not just a selected few. Now that the massive failures of California are out in the open, it's time for all citizens to join this movement to help make California great once again. It's the pathway to return power back into the people's hands. Go to newcaliforniastate.com and donate to this constitutional movement. Unifying together will safeguard our children's future. Your generous contributions will ensure statehood for New California. Go to newcaliforniastate.com and donate.